I am Tim Shirley, the senior minister of the South Shore United Church of Christ. This is a sermon for November 29th, the first Sunday of Advent, keeping awake in a sleepy time. Keep awake, says the writer of Mark's Gospel. What I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. What strange words these sound to us as we enter this normally warm and fuzzy time of year, affectionately called the holidays. To be honest, we would just as soon sleep right through this. Wake me up when it's over. After all, sleep is a great elixir. Sometimes a most intoxicating, wonderful avoidance tool. An ignorance device, allowing us to ignore, allowing us to deny whatever present crisis or crises confronts us. As we enter this holy season of Advent and a new church year, all our familiars have been rearranged. The proverbial cheese that orders our lives at this time of year, much like the rest of it in 2020, has been moved. All the days seem to run together, mundanely running together, all seeming the same. Everything is now either out of place, in the wrong place, has no place, or is sadly missing altogether. A constant reminder that we are under the worst of watches, the most ominous of warnings, to use some meteorological speak. As the first huge wave of pandemic washed over us in April, little did we imagine that not only would the virus still be with us as we enter December and the winter of much discontent, but that the second wave would be like a bad song, a whole lot louder and a whole lot worse. Oh, to just be able to sing a carol of the season. I resonate with so many other clergy when I declare how tired I am of COVID-19 novel coronavirus, a professional version of pandemic fatigue. It not only creeping into my preaching, but invading like the worst hostage taker in every facet of my ministry, taking over and taking no prisoners in this ongoing deadly dance. To avoid or ignore the pandemic's pervasive presence is to shirk responsibility about a plague that is impacting every area of our lives, every aspect, every corner, every nook and cranny. There is not one part of our existence it has failed to touch. To that part of our lifestyle, there is no immunity, herd or otherwise. To invoke COVID's perverse, ugly name too much is to give it too much power, too much control, and to risk obsession, calling attention to a painful reality that all of us would just as soon forget. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Rather than err on the side of caution and pretend that this plague of pandemic proportions does not exist, I choose to soldier on and meet this monster head on, hoping against all hope that the words I offer not only resonate, but that they help us cope, to better manage the depressed mood commensurate with these days. My goal is, at least to a minimum, to bring some level of comfort for the living of these days, helping us navigate and negotiate every careful, cautious step of the way, during what might be described as pandemic pandemonium. This is our reality, our lot in life, in the here and now. This is the hand we have been dealt. Even so, let's acknowledge that it all just feels unfair. Believing that we have been robbed of so much. I hear from many of you who are living your twilight years that indeed life is short and that COVID is slowly, rapidly stealing valuable time, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, and so forth. Time is wasting, time that none of us will ever get back. And Advent, of all the liturgical seasons, is all about time, reminding us of how precious and how attentive we are called to be in every moment, bellwether and ordinary, taking nothing for granted. In some ways, perhaps we are living in the shadow, or at least to some degree, connecting with at least a modicum of the dark experiences our biblical forebears endured during the worst of their most challenging and fearful days. All hell was breaking loose around them at what amounted to a seminal time when the writings of the Christian scriptures, what we traditionally call the New Testament, were composed and compiled. This was poignantly pronounced at the time of the writing of the Gospels. Mark was written at or around what we might call ground zero on the calendar's crucible movement. The second fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of its temple occurring in the year 70 CE. A siege that began on April 14th and lasted until September 8th. 4 long months, 3 long weeks, and 4 long days. Are you sensing a pattern here? A little connectivity? Some association or transference, perhaps a little projection. Perhaps in some perverse ways, we can now better begin to relate to our biblical forebears' plight at least somewhat a little more, a degree better, now realizing what it is like to live in the vortex, in the midst of a horror that during the apex of its duration surely seemed to have no end in sight, no expiration date. Same as now. As it was then in so many ways, so it is now. We have much in common. Similarities are obvious, not lost on any of us who visit these texts and who are living these days. One enemy in human form, the other a microorganism, a serpentine virus, invisible to the naked eye, like the wind, easily seen in its deadly demonic dance. We can follow its tracks. Contact tracing revealing a trail of misery. We know where it has been. It is like a ghost or an apparition, but it ain't Casper. It leaves a horrific wake, a path of destruction and death, always painfully obvious where it has roamed, randomly so, and to whom it has made its unwelcome and untimely visitation. It is no wonder that the biblical writers, even as they sought to write words of comfort and hope to buoy downtrodden spirits, wearied and haggard souls, strangely wound up doing the opposite as they penned their prophetic essays. Revelations full of gloom and doom, writings replete with hollow promises, and prophecies meant to encourage and support, but ironically leaving nothing in their footsteps but failure and disappointment. Unfulfilled pledges, dashing hopes and dreams. It begs the question, is it better to give false hope, a false sense of security, rather than the honest, unvarnished truth, the hard facts of the case? Good question. For we have learned that many find peace, relishing a false sense of security, as they enjoy reveling in their delusionary imagination, swearing by fake news, alternative facts, placing their very lives in harm's way to prove their stubborn stance and stupid viewpoints. Reports have been made that certain individuals, while lying on their deathbeds, even as they struggled mightily to take their last precious breath, continued to stand their shaky ground and swear by those who had misinformed, no, disinformed them, that their affliction was either cancer, pneumonia, or some other unnamed malady. Because they knew, beyond a shadow of all doubt, they knew that COVID was a deep state hoax, a fabricated political agenda hatched and propagated by the left. They swore up and down that COVID did not exist, that they had been misdiagnosed. They literally died holding on to a lie, clinging to a false narrative. They believed what they believed, choking on their own toxic Kool-Aid. They were wrong, dead wrong. Wake up, keep awake, says the biblical writer. But oh, how unfortunately, sadder still for biblical literalists, how far off from accurate did the biblical writer prove to be back in the day. They believed what they believed, creatively writing these emerging and evolving thoughts, embellished and exaggerated fantasies, informing their hopes and dreams. They were wrong, dead wrong. The writer describes in excruciatingly vivid technicolor detail how the sun would darken and the moon would not shed its light while stars fell from the heavens, even shaking the powers in the heavens. Then, after all these supernatural pyrotechnics, then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. Sounds great. Then came the promise. All these things would come to pass during the lifetime of these saints, always a martyr's breath away from death. Truly I tell you, Mark says, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Nope, didn't happen. The only thing that was correct was that indeed there was a whole lot of wind. Whether mistaken or flat out wrong, these things never came to pass. And for those waiting now for this invasion of the body snatchers, a divine rescue of the highest order, well, good luck with that. How'd it work out for you? We, humanity, the human species, are here in the here and now, and we must make the most, the best of our predicament that is our common lot. We are equipped. Wishful thinking, hopeful praying will not take away the burden of the day. We must pull together to fight this scourge on society, this scourge of a global scale. We are our best and only hope in finding ways to stop this plague in its tracks. Diligently wearing masks and socially distancing is the key to our surviving and thriving. Prayer may help us manage our anxieties and fears, supporting our emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, but it will not magically diminish, much less demolish, this inconvenient invasion thrust into all our circumstances and situations. And a vaccine certainly couldn't hurt either. All through Advent, the biblical writers prophesy their warnings, offer their glimpses of the present moving into the future, promising new days to come that will liberate the oppressed and subjugate with judgment and condemnation the oppressor. That is why John the Baptist is so prominent in these texts. Not so popular. Not only does he serve as the harbinger for the coming one in Christ Jesus, but he prepares the way of the Lord by ushering a new and different day. That is why he speaks of winnowing forks and burning chaff. The early church putting within his purview the painful prerogative of Rome's derogatory dominion over a Jewish nation historically beaten down by various adversaries and now fearfully living at the disposal of the powers and principalities of the Roman legions. The word from Mark's gospel is a sobering word: to keep awake, to stay awake. Elsewhere in the gospel, these gospel musings, to keep watch. It is a reminder of the due diligence of living. We who now live in the dark shadows of the valley of death are called to practice patience, a hard row to hoe, as we say, while living lives of intentionality and sobriety. We await a better day, a new day coming. In much the same way our biblical forebears were forced to do under their dire circumstances, the adverse situations, the dreadful scenarios that swirled around them, always threatening to consume them. We are now getting a very different, but somewhat equally painful taste of their pain. The reality of their lives strangely becoming precursors to our present predicaments and predilections. We can, at least to some degree, the slightest perhaps, now empathize with their plight, and surely can fully sympathize with them in every way imaginable. What we learn from them is that we will survive. We will overcome. Sadly, there are those who will be the proverbial collateral damage, attrition continuing to take its ugly toll in the deaths of many. Our hope and prayer is that we might be fortunately lucky enough to be spared, that we will be the remnant that not only lives for ourselves, but will continue the human quest for those who were snuffed out in whatever prime of life they were living. We know the precautions. We now know the drill. With diligence and a keen eye we watch. With vigilance we wait. With faith and hope we keep alert, though sleep, alluring sleep, beckons. We heartily strive to stay awake, believing. For behold, a great day is surely coming. In the name of the one who creates, redeems, and sustains, and calls us to watch and wait, stay awake. Amen and amen.